All right, we're at a 30-minute time frame today, everybody. So I think we'll go ahead and kick it off. We are recording the webinar today, so if you missed the first part of this, well, you're not hearing this right now, but we will have this available for you. So thanks everybody for joining us. I'm excited about today's topic. We're going to talk about how we're taking the notion of being able to catalog our software services really to the next kind of phase, really putting intelligent data and descriptions around our service endpoints and around metadata. And I've got with us today Jeff Schnitter, who's joining us to talk about how he's built several different types of service catalogs and software catalogs according to some of these practices. Jeff, can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what you do at Cortex right now before we get into kind of the meat of the webinar today?
Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Schnitter. I'm a solution architect at Cortex, which means I get to play around with all the cool technology and tinker and then work with customers to see how they might implement the software as well. Spent most of my career in DevOps, most recently at Workday implementing Cortex.
Awesome. Thanks. All right, so let's get right into it. Uh, I'll give you a second to pick this one up. I decomposed our monolith into microservices to simplify our cloud deployments, right? Not so much, right? And then we're not here to like bash microservices, right? There's enough of that goes on. I think that the benefits of microservices, 12-factor development, the portability that we get in doing multi-cloud deployments, like these are really well understood benefits, right? So that's not the point of this, but also we have to admit that with these benefits, why are we automating in the first place? Because we've increased our complexity, right? We've added complexity to these deployments, and we see kind of solutions to this complexity that have sprung up across a lot of different DevOps phases. But nevertheless, this is still sort of the state of the art, right? This is still sort of the sprawl, and I think sort of the landscape for most, right? We're in transition. I think that we obviously have not decomposed everything into microservices. We have found mini services in some cases end up being sort of a better approach. It's not the pure atomic packaging that you would get, but you get a lot of the portability benefits and a lot of the ability to put these applications comfortably within multi-cloud environments. But what we're left with still is just little alignment on how to report on these different services, how to try to drive sort of cross-functional improvements across these services. I mean, it's hard enough to establish basic things like service ownership, and it's not like we're not pushing for solutions, right? I mean, you see the sort of spreadsheet icons that are dotted throughout the landscape here. We sort of appreciate that. This is kind of what we have available to us, right? Is the ability to catalog these things in sort of the tools that are available to us now. But the thing is that if we don't start getting a little bit more sophisticated about this problem, right? If we don't start doing things like putting systems in place that can help us to establish clear ownership, that this problem is just going to continue to sprawl. It's going to get worse, right? These are the types of problems that are really susceptible to entropy when we're growing quickly. And that means that if we don't start thinking about solutions to these problems now, it's going to be exponentially to kind of hard, solve them. It's going to be that much harder to solve them, in the future. And the existing tool state, I mean, we have some data available to us. I mean, the Kubernetes dashboard gives us some good information about the services that are running within it, but that's not what this meant for, right? I mean, it's meant to be informational enough to give us, the basic information about what's running in our cluster. But in order to really like take these services and map them back to our business and the way that our workflows kind of work uniquely within our teams, this is just, it's not going to cut it, right? But neither is this, right? I mean, like we've seen, Jeff, how many versions of this, right? I mean, this is kind of where you get to in the absence of solutions that have really been vaunted, by the industry, in the absence of, commoditized and well understood solutions, we end up with these sort of, stopgaps. Um, but these improvement initiatives become more and more difficult because these types of solutions are rigid, they're arbitrary, they cause this, right? I mean, not only are they bad to look at, but they're bad to keep up to date. They're bad to, kind of have any type of posterity with. Because when things change, if you've got 15 different teams looking at 15 different versions of a spreadsheet, you don't know which one's actually authoritative. This type of sprawl becomes really really hard to manage. And that's why we're here. That's why we're to discuss this today, right? What if we did have a clean sheet of paper to think about how engineering teams can create, manage, and catalog all of their services, right? I think microservices are certainly responsible for, a certain amount of the complexity, but we haven't fully transitioned to microservices either. And we need to manage just individual software services, more traditional services, and the resources that those services are dependent upon as well, right? So we need to kind of rethink this approach, and that's what we're here to talk about today in the form of more sophisticated service catalogs. And this motion, like going through this one step, right? Rethinking this approach, the way that we organize our services, can unlock a whole new path to engineering maturity, right? Just being able to catalog, establish ownership, track, and be able to help, deal with change and other dynamics to individual software services allows us to then start thinking about these services at a new level to drive behavior in different ways, right? We talk a lot about Cortex's ability to take this data and put them into a scorecarding format that can drive engineering behavior. But you can't do that, without taking the first step to really organize things and really organize them not just, according to some, basic hierarchy, but one that really matches your business, your domain, the way that work gets done at your job. And Jeff's going to talk a lot about that in particular when we talk about how we really put these catalogs together. So I don't want to take too much away from that conversation. I just want to make sure that we understand that this is a problem, that we're here to talk about a solution to that problem, but that solving this problem actually does a lot of things. It unlocks whole new layers of maturity that organizations can take in terms of the way they drive productivity, the way they drive production readiness, reliability, and all these other things that are really important to what those teams are producing. Now, Jeff has taken the flexibility that we've put into our catalog and really started to explore the possibilities. Part of what I love about the work that Jeff does with our tool is really he gets to really think, like, how can I put this thing through the corner cases? Like, what are some really creative things that can be done with this tool? Now, I'm not going to pretend to know anything about college sports, but Jeff knows a lot about college sports. And so he's actually put together something that I think is very cool, maybe an unexpected use case that comes out of having this sophisticated level of flexibility available to us in the service catalog. So enough of me talking for now. Jeff, why don't you kind of take us through first, maybe just give us a little bit of context, just show us how Cortex, organizes these types of entities, what kind of is our domain before you get into kind of this cool use case, and then we'll drive another demo after that.
You got it, Justin. Thanks for that intro. So a little bit later on in the webinar, we're going to talk about practical use cases of cataloging and catalog customization. We'll start off with some impractical uses. And this is one of the things that I really like about my position is I really get to explore the possibilities of what you can do with our platform and with software catalogs. So if I click on the catalog pull-down menu in Cortex, what you'll see in purple are the traditional delineation of services, teams, resources, and domains that are available in the platform. What Cortex will be releasing pretty soon is this ability to customize your catalog. So in blue, you'll see some of the things that I've been able to create in a test instance, just to take a look at the possibilities that exist. So just to give you a quick idea of the impractical use cases, I'm a big college sports fan, and what we have here is a list of all of the NCAA Division I basketball conferences that exist. I'm a big basketball fan. And just so I can represent my alma mater, we're going to take a look at the Big West Conference. I created this as a domain. All of the children within my domain are the universities that belong to this conference. My alma mater right here, UC Santa Barbara. And I will encourage anybody, if you want to drop in the chat, let us know your alma mater, whether it's in the United States or not, would love to hear it. And the idea here is that by being able to click on this catalog customization for domains, you see just the conferences. Whereas if I take a look at all of my domains, I have all of this information for all of the stuff that I've created in my test instance. This allows me to draw people directly where they need to go. Justin, back to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, that's super cool, and we're gonna dig a little further into the way that catalog works here in just a moment. We'll have another um, demo for you. So Jeff, while I am reclaiming my screen here, could you tell us really quick what like when you were what did you think about the way that we were able to do customization in this catalog that were like, oh, NCAA basketball, this is like the perfect thing to be able to organize this.
Yeah, I think, and we're going to see this a little bit later when I do the next part of the demo, which is the practical use case. I think that you touched on the aggregation of your data. The first thing you need to do when you're taking a look at your ecosystem is to be able to catalog everything that you've got. And that can be a big challenge. You've got multiple sources of truth often. You've got multiple tools that are pulling in that data. And the first step to making sure that you can tame what you have is to take that inventory. And I don't recommend anybody doing anything further in a developer portal until you've got that full catalog of the information. So my impractical use case was, let me take a look at a body of data that I might have. Let me break it into the various components that I need so that I can then start to utilize it correctly.
I think that's awesome. But we're also going to go through, something that's maybe more of a practical use case. So I think that I have got this figured back out. I apologize. The slideware is not this is not cooperating. But you know what, Jeff, why don't I apologize, and switching back and forth has made me lose my slides here. What we're going to look at now. So you just sort of demonstrated how we could do this neat, flexible thing to model this data. But Jeff, you've taken the same flexibility and you've actually created like a real use case, something to monitor the performance of our own API, here at Cortex. And that use case, I think, is something that here we go. Look at me. This use case, I think, is something that may, if you're not the world's biggest sports fan, like maybe somebody like me who actually learned a fair amount about college athletics just through this discussion, this may be something that resonates a little bit more, right? You're looking at here a series of API endpoints that actually make up some of the backend and the services, backend services of our architecture. And Jeff, you've been able to catalog these endpoints and take advantage of the flexibility of the service catalog to do a number of performance management type of actions on this. So at the risk of losing you again, I'm going to turn this back over to you to take us through this case use case a little bit more deeply.
Good stuff. Thanks, Justin. So Justin talked a little bit earlier about cataloging services and microservice journey. A lot of people are moving from monolith to microservices. And I think that although it's a complex thing that you need to walk through, I think it's fairly well understood being able to define all of your services. Although some people might debate what exactly a service is. I wanted to take a look at things other than services. And they're supported today in Cortex under resources. But if you were to take a look at resources, you might have multiple resource definitions. This is all the infrastructure you might have. Your AWS resources, Google Cloud services, maybe some of your infrastructure, maybe you've got some hardware that you manage yourself. And catalog customization is exciting to me because it allows you to elevate.
Jeff, I think your screen may have just frozen there, actually. I think that we're seeing the there we go. Yeah, you're good. We're still seeing the NCAA screen here.
You still see the NCAA screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me stop the share. I'm going to share one more time. Okay. Do you see the home screen that I've got right now, Justin? That should show all of my services.
Yeah. You're at the dashboard here. Yep.
Okay. Yep. So
thanks,
we were talking about the resources that you have access to, and I really like catalog customization because I can elevate some of the things that I want to take a look at and make really a first-class citizen under catalog. So the practical use case was me starting with a business problem. And that business problem was, how might we analyze the performance of the Cortex application itself? How might we break it into its various components and be able to use the tooling available in an internal developer portal to measure that, to create scorecards against that? So what I have here is a demo. We don't necessarily have this live yet. This is really a proposal that I am able to make in my role as a solution architect. And I really thought about three things that I wanted to take a look at when it came to performance of the application. And that is the pages, the actual pages that we have in our application. And so I took a look at our Git source and I looped through it. There's a directory for each page that we've got in our application. And I ended up creating all of the pages as domains in Cortex. And then I created a custom catalog for those pages. I also created schedules. Schedules are background jobs that we run to pull in data into the application. I created these as a custom entity. And then Justin was showing how we have APIs. And I don't have those listed here. We'll actually create a new catalog to show you how easy it is to create those. So just to show you what these pages look like, this is pulled from a Spring YAML file where I'm able to grab all of these sources. And if I were to take a look and edit this catalog, we can see that this is selecting all entity types called schedule, which are a custom entity that I created. So very simply, I have the ability to create this catalog for these types. Pages are much more complex because these are a domain hierarchy that I've created. We see some high-level domains. We see some domains that we can drill into. This domain hierarchy actually has 3 levels. So if I take a look at this catalog, you're going to see a much more complex definition. The entity type is domain, but I also have the ability with the Cortex query language to have a much more complex definition. In this case, I have to pick everything that's using this domain called pages domain as a parent, a grandparent, or a great grandparent. And this can show you the flexibility where you can create something very simple or very complex. But you start with your business problem, and then you create your definitions in your catalog to help you solve that business problem. And that's the way that we always recommend approaching that aggregation phase. So if we come back to all of my catalogs here, I'm going to create one now. We'll do it live. And I'm going to create an API catalog. And very similar to what we just took a look at with the definition for the schedules, I'm going to select a custom type that I created called API. And this API type, I created through automation. I looped through our open API JSON spec. I extracted all of these API types, and I was able to create this as a custom resource. And now with catalog customization, I have the ability to have a catalog called API, and it takes me right to this specific custom resource. So I don't have to drill in multiple layers deep, which I might have had to in the past, where I'd go into resources and navigate to find this API type. And now what I have created here is 3 types. I have APIs, I have the background schedules, and I have the pages. So 2 of these were custom types, the API and schedule type. Pages, I'm using a built-in type, which is domain, but I wanted to create a specific view for it. Now, by taking a look at these 3 things that I've put together, now I can go to that next step. I've passed the aggregation phase where I've created that data. Now I can create some scorecards against this. Now, I haven't done that yet, but that would be the next phase of this where I might create some scorecard rules. For example, do I have a performance test? How am I scoring on that performance test? Now I can measure against that. But what we wanted to show here is you start with the aggregation, the business problem you're trying to solve, and how you pull in all of those entities and create custom catalogs to help drive your users to the data so that you can improve it. Justin, back to you.
Oh, that's great. No, and that was, I mean, and that was all, from scratch. I mean, you were able to pull in all of these endpoints kind of in one fell swoop, and then it wasn't just about being able to catalog them. There were very specific metrics that were used, in this case by the team, to then populate that catalog into something useful. Now we've got all kinds of other resources around scorecarding and all these other neat practices that you can do once you've got the data catalog. Like I said before, this is kind of the first step in sort of a journey into better engineering maturity through data and better productivity, right? We got into this a little bit while I was struggling to get my my slideware back after the demo. But Jeff, maybe let's dig in a little bit further here. So it's like, I mean, I think what we just showed everyone is how easy it is to use Cortex to actually pull the services in. but there's some pre-work, right? There's some organization that needs to be done, right? We need to be kind of thoughtful about a few things business wise before we start really organizing this. So, tell us about like what are some of those really important first steps to take?
I think I mentioned that with the specific use case that I had, which was start with a business problem. Now, often that business problem is going to be, I don't have a system of record. I don't have a list of owners. I don't have a list of all of my services. But the first step really should be define what you're trying to solve rather than just going to grab all of that data. Once you've defined the problem that you're trying to solve, then it's really taking a look across all of your ecosystem to make sure that you're able to pull in your current source of truth and aggregate that so that you can define it in your developer portal. So it might be the spreadsheet that Justin had showed with the scary face on it that, it's really hard to keep that up to date. You might have data coming from multiple sources. And so you're going to have to reconcile those. Do you have things coming from GitHub? Do you have things coming from Jira? Do you have things coming from Okta? Figure out where those sources of truth are. And then you're going to have to agree as an organization how you're going to pull them in and make the source of truth your developer portal.
I mean, I guess there's not going to be one, answer for every team that's the same, right? I mean, but you deal with a lot of customers who are kind of like in the middle of this phase right now, trying to get this stuff organized. You deal a lot with, like we talked about before, the Cambrian phase that we're in with the dev tooling space. How taking this first step? I mean, what are we talking? I mean, is it a few teams getting together over the course of a week? Does this thing typically take a couple of quarters? I mean, what is the real push at this phase, do you think?
A lot of it will depend on the appetite that the organization has to adopt this as a standard. So it's a technical problem, but it's also a cultural problem. And what I have seen is that when you get to the point where you need a developer portal, it's because you're having a hard time maintaining the sprawl of your definition. It might exist in multiple places. Multiple teams might think they have some say in the ownership. You might actually see that you've got multiple definitions for the same service because you have different tools that are the source of truth. So one big challenge will be to make sure organizationally the team has agreed that this is going to be the source of truth. What I have seen in working with customers is that using a developer portal like Cortex can often be a driving function to make sure that becomes the source of truth. And it might cause change to those other tools that might be currently feeding in to that sprawl that exists today.
Okay, so that's kind of like the realization of what we were saying before, that like just putting the ownership in place, organizing the services, like getting them in there can unlock kind of these next phases. So that actually is a good segue into the next question that I have here. What is that life cycle? So now we've got them in, great, they are present and accounted for. If we really want to take these to start driving cultural change, organizational change, better developer behavior, and positive effects, what do we have to do next?
One of the things that we typically see is the creation of scorecards for these entities. And when you talk about a maturity curve and the progression, we'll typically suggest creating an ownership scorecard. Do all of my entities have an owner? Do all of my entities have more than one owner? It's always helpful to have a backup owner as well. That's usually the first step. Then we take a look at one or two scorecards where you can start to measure organizational change. Maybe it's your security profile. Maybe you want to make sure that you have vulnerabilities addressed in a certain amount of time. You start to measure things like that. It might be operational readiness. Do you have your runbooks? Do you have logging? Do you have monitoring? These things. And what we'll typically see is you move to that first scorecard, which might be ownership, and you move further right, which is that maturity, security, and other detailed information that you want for each of those entities to show that you are progressing in that maturity curve.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, that to me is some of the most compelling things here is it's like by solving this one problem, this one thing, just organizing and ownership is a bottleneck to so many other things we know we want to be doing and should be doing, practices we should be having with an organization. But like the way that this just kind of lays up sports metaphors and scorecards is like as like a mechanism to drive some of this behavior. I think it's so clear, kind of so simple the way that those two things can work together. You've got the data in one place. Now, cool ways to actually use the data to drive new effects. We're coming up with just a few minutes for audience questions. I haven't seen anything pop into the Q&A yet, but I'll give just a few seconds now. If you have something you'd really like to ask Jeff about the demos that you saw today, or about what we can do with our cataloging, please ask away. In the meantime, while we're seeing if there's another one, I have kind of a follow-on question to what you said here. Again, given that you see so many customers kind of going through this, we've talked a lot about like what the right thing to do, and what it looks like to catalog and move through, but like really on the ground, I mean, like you talked about cultural change a little bit, but like what's a specific example of like, okay, where it's hard to get like the information you need, or the buy-in you need from the people, to even, it's like the tools here, it's like, we have everything you need. What is it that can keep people from moving? Maybe a quick answer.
You got it. And I just see that we've got a question in the chat about the Cortex pricing model. It's a per seat license, Jeff, so we can definitely connect you to the right people if you need more details on that. And Justin, to answer your question, one of the bigger challenges I have seen is with ownership, because customers often have more than one source of truth for ownership. They might have an integration like Workday, but they might also have some security permissions coming in from Okta. They might also have GitHub Teams where they're pulling in some of that data. And a big challenge really becomes that reconciliation of the ownership. I have found that defining the services is a little bit easier than actually getting all of that team information and making sure that they've got that accurate.
That's, again, like the human problems here too. And we've got a great question from Samir. How do you define the hierarchy of entities? I assume here in Cortex. We covered that a little bit when you went into the NCAA demo, but if you could just cover that again briefly. Then are the scorecards aggregated based on that hierarchy, which is, I think, kind of the meat of the question there.
Yeah, that's a great question, Samir. So the hierarchy of entities, you actually define that yourself based on what you have within your organization. So what I did show was a hierarchy of domains, so I can have parent and child relationships. You can also define entities and dependencies that they might have on other resources. So a lot of that can be discovered based on taking a look at your Git repositories, taking a look at things like New Relic dependencies. So a lot of that is self-discovered by Cortex. Other pieces of it you're able to link up yourself. And again, it's dependent on what your definitions are. Cortex does its best job to be able to help you discover that. Scorecards are aggregated based on the entity hierarchy. Scorecards can be defined to work against just specific parts of your hierarchy, services, resources, or domains, or things even smaller subsets of those. So you define the scorecards and what they're going to score against based in your definition of your catalog.
That's awesome. That's thanks, Samir. Good question. And one of the nice streamlining impacts of the way that I think we set the data up. So we're right at the time. So thanks everybody for this quick one. Oh, didn't get the point about how you discover APIs. We have time really quickly. We can answer that one. One of the attendees is asking that they didn't quite understand how we discover those API endpoints. If you could take us through that again real quick.
Sure thing. We create an open API JSON schema for the Cortex product itself. And I created a small Python script that looped through that. And then I used the Cortex API to write all of those entities to Cortex. So for some things, Cortex is able to reach out and find the data for you. Other things, you might be able to write your own integrations or small code snippets. In this example, I would probably have a CI/CD integration that would go through that open API documentation anytime it was updated, and then make those changes into the Cortex system.
Jeff has done really neat things, like, for instance, a Python-driven CLI to integrate with the Cortex API to help streamline workflows that way too. So showcases the power of what can be done like with the API, but I think also Jeff is really creative about the way that he interfaces with the tool too. So. Cool. All right, great questions, everybody. Can we see a demo for the CI/CD? Not on this one because we're at the time, but let's take a note of this one. We're always creating more content, right? I've got a couple of new demos that we're creating, like as we speak, like trying to get out right now. So an integration with the CI/CD pieces Jeff just described, that's something we can produce pretty quickly. I like that. Okay. Thanks all. I appreciate it. Feel free to reach out. We do have just a couple of quick calls to action here. We'll be on the road. We will be all over the place actually in March. So come find us at KubeCon or Backstage Con. And if you want to see a demo, if you want to get into some of the stuff that Jeff's been describing in a little bit more of a customized fashion, you can do that coming to the website as well, and we can get into sort of a more deep exploration of the tool. But thanks everybody for taking the time. This QR code will take you to our resources page where you can take a look at some of our upcoming events, and we hope to see you there.
Thanks everyone.
Jeff. Thanks everybody.